Well, hello and welcome to the show. My name is Tim Holmes, and I am a writer, an artist, musician, teacher, just a whole bunch of different things. But most importantly, I am, I would say, a lover of stories. And if you've found your way here to the show, chances are that might be a love that you share as well. And what I wanted to start off by asking is, why is that? Like, what is it that captivates us about stories? Why is it that we will, sit for hours in a darkened movie theater? Why is it that we will spend money and time and energy to go to concerts and listen to someone singing songs for us and playing for us? Why is it that we will take the time to, go through the long journey of reading a book cover to cover? What is it about stories? Because, a lot of times we think about stories and we think that they are primarily entertainment, that this is the way that we kind of occupy our time, that this is the way that we keep ourselves amused and distracted and so forth. But I really believe that there's something deeper going on here, that there's something about stories that is really, that speaks to us on like a deep human level. And the question that we really want to explore here on the show is like, what is that? What is it about stories that keeps us coming back and keeps us coming back for more? And I believe that there is something about stories that helps us to understand ourselves. It helps us to understand the world, and it helps us to understand our place in it. It helps us to understand who we are, that in a lot of ways, the way that we see ourselves, the way that we develop our own identity is determined by the kind of story that we see ourselves in. The way that we grow, the way that we change as people is in a lot of ways influenced by the kinds of heroes that we choose to emulate. What kind of story do we see ourselves in, and what is our place in the world? And in that kind of larger sense, I believe that stories are also that which binds us together as a people, that stories are that which draws us together and enables us to inhabit the cultural space as well. And that's something that we need to understand about ourselves. It's something that we need to understand about our culture. And in a lot of ways, they are sort of like the common threads, right? Like these are the common threads that bind us together, that enable us to be able to have relationship and trust for one another. And I also believe that at the center of all of these stories, if we watch and listen to and read and expose ourselves to many of these kinds of narratives, we'll start to realize that there are certain kind of key elements that we can come across in all of these stories that are common to all of them. And so I believe that there's actually at the center of these stories a single common element, that there is a thread that is common to all stories. And what I've come to call this is, I've come to refer to this as the golden thread. And this is not like a new idea. This is actually a very ancient idea that is present in many traditions around the world. In Taoism, it's the idea of like the way of the world or the way of the universe. In Buddhism, you could call it a way of expressing the idea of the middle way. In the teachings of Christ, he talks about the narrow gate that leads to life, the straight and narrow road. If you think about it in terms of myths and fairy tales, right, it's that magic thread that the hero finds in the dark place that leads him or her up and out of the darkness and back to the light. And so what I'd like to do is to actually explore that. Like, what are these common threads that we find in stories, and what is it that keeps us coming back to them? And what is this kind of key sort of core element, and how can we learn to distinguish that and learn to be able to follow that where it leads? And I think that this kind of thing is more important now than perhaps it has ever been before, because, as a culture here in the West, we, I think, have seen a lot of what I would just call cultural unraveling happening over the past era here. And that is the breakdown of the ability for people to be able to communicate with one another, to be able to understand one another, to even be able to coexist with one another. We're seeing a lot of tension. We're seeing a lot of pulling apart at the seams, you might say, of like the fabric of the culture, the fabric of reality, and even, I think, the fabric of identity that we all are made up of ourselves. And so I think that it is more important now than ever to be able to look back into the past and to ask ourselves the question of, like, what are the stories that define us? Like, what are the stories that define us as a people and even ourselves individually? And also to understand, like, what do these stories mean? Like, what do they mean for us today here in the modern world? Even stories that were written hundreds or perhaps thousands of years ago. Like, what do those things mean for us now? And I think it's also important for us to be able to look at the kinds of stories that we're still telling today, the kinds of stories that we're still telling ourselves, and to ask ourselves, like, why are we doing that? Like, what is this need that we have to be able to for us to continue to tell these kinds of stories and to share them with one another? And what do those things mean? And how do those things connect and interface with the ancient stories? Do they connect? And what are sort of those common threads that run between those? And so these are some of the ideas that have been going around in my mind lately, and I've been working on writing these down in the form of what will hopefully someday become a book itself. But I wanted to start by just simply sharing them with you. I'm going to be sitting down with some friends as well and talking about some of these ideas and kind of working it out and fleshing some of these ideas out in conversation. But I also wanted to invite you into the conversation as well, and to invite you to join with us as we are kind of going on this journey of exploration, sort of following the thread and trying to see where it leads. And so I would want to invite you to interact with us in this. If you are finding some of these thoughts helpful as we are going forward, I would encourage you to share them with other people and to invite them to come along with us, and then also to interact with the comments and whatever other form the conversation might be able to take. That because in a lot of ways, like, we are still telling the stories, right? We are still telling the stories of our lives. Like, that's what we do every day. And there's an invitation there, right? There's an invitation to others to come alongside us, to join us on the journey. And so I want to just start here by extending that invitation to you. I would invite you to come and join us on this journey. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So once again, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share this with you, and to invite you to be able to come with us and join us on this journey, on this quest for the golden thread.